Anytime that you have a reading that is repeated in more than one gospel, it typically means that there's some importance attached to it. It's interesting and it's important to read all accounts, because as we would in a court of law, we would never commit somebody or we would never convict somebody based on a single person witness. And in fact, even in the times of the Jews, you needed at least 2 witnesses in order to be able to convict somebody. All right? And so we have the same thing today. All right? We have multiple witnesses. One of the things that makes the police suspicious is if your stories are radically different. What also makes them suspicious, if your stories are too precise. If there's 3 of you and you all tell exactly the same story, usually that means that you are planning this together or that you've made it up and you want to make sure that you're all telling the same story. So if we had different gospel readings that said exactly the same thing, we would be suspicious that they would have been created, and so that Jesus Christ becomes now, and God becomes this creation of man. But that's not what we see, because we have this in Luke, which is what we read today. We have it in Mark, and we have it in Matthew. And each one of them gives us an important detail to fill out the entire story. All right? In Luke's account, all right, the doctor again gives us some details. In this case, though, he doesn't give us quite all the details that Mark gives us, but he gives us these 2 very interesting details. Number 1, he says, as Jesus was approaching, the man said, "Who's coming?" Because obviously he can't see, so he hears the noise of the crowd, and he asks, "What's going on?" And they told him. They gave him the title, Jesus of Nazareth. Not a prophet or anything like that. And then it says in here, and he cried out. But the word that they use in Greek is voise. Voise is to cry out, okay? Like, if I look out, right, if I'm sitting at the coffee hour and I see Thespian in the kitchen, right, I cry out and I say, "Hey, give me a Greek coffee," right? I'm not crying out in pain because she makes good Greek coffee, right? But it's a loud voice. And then he cries out and he gives him a title now, and he says, "Son of David," referring to him in the messianic way. And then he says, "Eleison me," have mercy on me, which is the greatest and best prayer that we have, right? If we are in trouble, rather than big, long prayers, the best prayer that we have is Kyrie eleison, have mercy on me. And this is the prayer that he gives them, a very simple prayer. And then they cry out and they say, the details we have now, is they say, hey, you know what? I don't know if Jesus has any time for you, so, be quiet. And what does it say then? In English, it says, but he cried out again. But this is not the word that they use in Greek. The word they use in Greek now is ekrazen, ekrake. All right? So this is not a loud voice. This is not a voice. This is now a loud cry of anguish. This is what happens at a funeral. This is the cry you hear at a funeral for somebody that you have lost. You wouldn't use the word a voice, but you would use the word ekrazen. This is a crying out in pain. This is a hard cry that he desires to have Jesus now make him whole. And so he gives him the same title again. David, Son of God, have mercy on me. He repeats this. All right. So, and it says, and it must have been a very serious cry out, because further on, it starts off, Luke says, stathis theo Isus. He stood there. So he heard it and he stops. So they're very clear here that this has reached Jesus' ear. He hears this. This is not just he's walking along. He's like, what is this yelling all about? He stops in his tracks and says now, bring him to me. This is a command form. All right? So, ekelevsan. You hear it when the bishop is here. Kelevson despota. The words translate to give the command, O master. And this is the same word that's used here that Jesus Christ says, ekelevson afton. He commanded him to come to him. He stops in his tracks and he says, come here. Not, oh, yeah, why don't you? No, this is a command form. And then he asks him the question. Now, not Jesus in every miracle does not do this, but in this case, he asks him, he says, what do you want me to do? Because the question is, what does the man want? Does he want to be physically whole? Does he want to be spiritually whole? What does he think? If the man is using this moniker for Jesus as the Son of David, the Messiah, then he wants him to do something. All right? And that's when he says, I want my sight. And Jesus gives him his sight. But now in Mark, we have now another important detail that we don't have in Luke. And it says here, and Jesus stopped, called him, same thing, and it says, and throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. So we have now a little bit more detail here that the man responds instantaneously. He gives him he calls him the Son of David, and when Jesus commands him to come, he comes. And he responds immediately, but we only have that now in Mark. All right? So what we are to take from this is at least to understand the nuances that are happening in this gospel reading. And it gives us very important points for us to consider. One is be persistent. If there is something that you want, and it is for the glory of God, then be persistent. And if you are told no, keep going on until you get it. If it glorifies God, it is worthy for you to pursue it. So this is the first thing, is be persistent in what you ask for, whether that's a prayer, whether that's for the healing of your family, whether it's for somebody now to not drink or to not smoke or to whatever that is continue to be persistent, but out of love. And that when somebody is doing that to you and is being persistent to you, the second lesson is get up and do it, right? Because where the devil is in the logismi, is should I do this? I don't know if I should do it. What about this? What should I do? And the thinking, now I'm not saying just jump and do anything, but what I'm saying is with discernment, right? If this thing that you are being asked to do is for the glory of God, then like the blind man, get up and do it. And don't wait. Because the more you wait, that's where we say the devil is in the details. Because we mean that he gives us all of this logismi for us to now think about why we shouldn't do what will glorify God. And that's the second thing to take away from this. So again, let us be persistent in those things that glorify God. And if now we are receiving that voice, then let us respond in kind, and let us respond like the blind man in speed and in all haste.